Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to this week session. The theme that we are focusing on for this week's class session is quantitative content analysis. We are continuing with the steps in doing content analysis. Previously, we dealt with steps 1, 2, 3. Steps 1 to 3. Steps 1 is the providing context or contextualizing or your study or setting the scene, whereby you need to provide the problem statement. Why are you doing this research? Providing the research questions and so forth. That is your step 1. Then step 2 is the framework, establishing the framework, whereby you provide supporting theory and the literature. All right, and then step 3, which is the most important, is the method, because it entails a lot of aspects and elements that have to do with the method itself, which is the content analysis method. So it involves a lot of activities, the steps, whereby you need to identify the population, distinguish between the accessible population and the target population, select the unit of analysis, construct the categories, code your data, and establish reliability and validity. So you see, then this step is the most critical step in the content analysis process. So for this session, we'll be continuing with step 3, because we did not complete the step during our previous session. All right, still on step 3, which is the method. Now we'll be dealing with the concept of coding, right? So the data itself, you've observed the data you observed the data for 5 days. Now we've got this chunk and chunks of data. Now you need to make sense of the data by processing it, so that you are able to analyze that data further. So the coding is a process of transforming the data for analytical purposes. There are 2 ways of coding the data, namely the manifest and the latent coding. So you need to decide on which one to use for your study. So the manifest is the coding entails the process of counting the actual physical elements that are there on the message itself, right? What you are seeing, you're coding what you're actually seeing, what is visible, and what is visible from the data, right? So you're coding exactly what is said in the message. This is basically the manifest coding and what manifest coding entails, right? So then the latent codings, then we, instead of just coding what is there, just counting what we are seeing, what is visually there, we go deeper than the physical elements of the message, right? Because we seek now to uncover the hidden meanings beyond the data. So this type of coding is useful when we are interested in the attitudes that are decipherable from the message itself. So we're looking, right? You cannot infer attitudes by just coding what you see. So attitudes, we cannot just be able to tell attitudes without going deeper into the message, without interpreting what we are reading. For instance, if you are coding a newspaper and then you are looking at the negative perceptions of the coverage of women news, women stories, right? So you need to then do latent coding, because sometimes the message itself that you are reading cannot tell if this has to do with negative perception. So you need to then interpret what you're reading when you are coding then data. So it's by going further than just stating or counting what you are seeing. This is the what we call latent coding. So you need to decide with your own research what type of coding you will be preferring, right? Okay, still in the process of coding, we need to determine the way how we're going to quantify our data, right? There are three ways of looking at it. The first one is nominal level, the second one is at ordinal level, and the third one is at interval level. So for nominal level, it's just placing of data into categories by means of labeling or naming the data. This is the most applicable one insofar as this research process is concerned for this portfolio. We're not doing ordinal level because we're not measuring variables in a rank order system. We're not ranking any variables. Furthermore, we're not doing interval level quantification because we're not concerned with using equal unit of measurements for the variables concerned. So our way of quantification will be nominal level, because we'll be placing data that we find from observing the newspaper over 5 days into categories, meaningful categories, by means of labeling or naming those categories. With every research, we need to establish that the study has integrity. That is, the study is scientific enough to surpass or to be able to pass scrutiny, right? To be scrutinized by others. So there are ways of ensuring this, which are reliability and validity. With reliability is to ensure that your study produces the same results if somebody else replicate the study. So the ways of doing this is to establish coders correlation, meaning that if you're doing a big study whereby it numerous or several coders are involved, you need to establish that there is a correlation between the coders. There is some sort of agreement between the two coders, or between the two or more coders that are involved in the study. This is applicable to big studies, right? Studies that are dealing with big data. In this case, you're alone. You're not having different coders, so there will be no issue in terms of coder correlation. Another way of ensuring reliability is by conducting a pilot study. A pilot study is a preliminary study, right? Just to test if the instruments that you'll be using are working. So you do a pilot study before you do the main study. Another way of ensuring reliability is to establish ways of resolving the coder disagreement. There should be some way of making sure that the coders agree on certain ways of dealing with the data. As I've mentioned, this is not applicable to you because you're not using more than one coder. Alright, another way of ensuring reliability is to ensure that you use standardized coding sheets or coding schemes, whereby you've accurately defined your categories, and then they are mutually exclusive and exhaustive. So this is some ways of ensuring that your coding or your data is reliable. Another way of ensuring that the integrity of the research is the validity of that research. What do you mean by validity? Is when the researcher is ensuring that they are measuring what they intended to measure, right? So they are measuring what they intended to measure. So if you are doing a study on type of crime stories covered by certain newspaper, are you measuring that, right? Crime stories covered in a certain newspaper, right? So if then you'll be looking at stories on human, stories on, okay, recreational stories, entertainment news and stuff like that, you're not measuring what you're supposed to be measuring, and then your study then will not be valid, or the result thereof will not be valid. So how do we ensure validity? Is by defining the categories and the concept that we are using, making sure that the coding schemes is mutually exclusive and exhaustive, like I've mentioned, and the sample reflects the research problem. So if you're drawing the sample in relation to a topic about types of crime stories covered by newspaper, then the sample should reflect that. Otherwise, your study will not be valid. Okay, here I've provided an example of a coding sheet from a particular study. So this researcher had two categories for their research. Category 1 is labeled stories on the achievements of women. So the category 1 was dealing with achievements of women, and category 2 was dealing with abuse of women. So from this we can infer that the topic at hand was about women achievements as well as women abuse covered by this particular newspaper, hence this type of categories. So the units of analysis that this researcher chose based on their research problem, words, characters, items, sentences were the units of analysis for this category, right? For number one in this category, she had words and characters as a unit, and then she placed that unit in the category in this category as well, all right? And then she had also character weights as well as a unit of analysis, and then she looked at this aspect, and then she placed the unit in this category dealing with this character weights as an item. And then the third unit here is the sentences or words. Also she had this in relation to this unit, and this unit was placed in this category as well. This on this category 1, this were the unit of analysis, and this is how she coded the data involving this category. And for category 2, this is how she coded. Also she used words, characters, items, sentences and concepts as the unit of analysis, and this is a unit of analysis that she placed into this category. So this is an example of a coding scheme or coding sheet that you can use for your own study. All right, then you've done the step 3, which is the method step, and the method involves a number of aspects: the coding, the quantification, the sampling, the population, and so forth and so forth. Whether the study is reliable, whether the study is valid, all those are elements that should be dealt with in step 4. Step 3, which deals with the method. Now we go into step 4, which deals with the findings. There are two ways of presenting your findings. You can use tables and charts. Please read pages 24 to page 29 of your prescribed book. The different kinds of charts, graphs, and tables discussed, and then the uses as well as the advantages of either one. How do you use a chart? What are charts suitable for? What kind of data is suitable for charts? When do you use a graph, and so forth and so forth. Just read there and decide on which method to use to present your findings. And this is how we'll be assessing your table, your graph or chart. Make sure that your table, chart or graph is neatly done, so that it's clear. We can see what's going on, and all those other elements that are involved are labeled appropriately. If you are using a chart, then you know how to label the charts and stuff like that. If you're using a chart, then the different types or the different aspects in the chart, all those things that make up the charts are clearly visible. If you're saying that there's 16% on stories about women abuse or gender-based violence, label that clearly. The 20% of murders, and so forth in your chart. This should be clearly visible. So as a reader, I should not be left to guess as to what does different kinds of elements that contained in your charts mean. So those things need to be clear. So you'll be also graded or assessed on the general presentation of your table, your chart. If you're using the graphs, do you label your axis, y-axis? What is in the y-axis? So what measurement is reflected in the y-axis, and similarly, what measurement is reflected in your x-axis? So read on this section regarding the graphs and the charts and the tables, so that you understand on how to use this when you are presenting your findings. Okay, this is basically this is how we're going to assess your graphs, charts, or tables. This is step 4, where you present your findings. Your findings should be clearly presented. They should deal with the research problem and the research questions. And then the step 5, which is the final step of your research or the process in content analysis, deals with the interpretation of your findings. You have presented your data using either a graph, a table, or a chart, right? So those are statistics. That alone does not say anything. So that those results should be interpreted. So how do then you interpret the results? You establish or you look for meaningful patterns from your findings, and then you discuss those. So how many stories dealt with women abuse? How many stories dealt with murders and stuff? Then what does this data tell us about the importance or the significance of crime stories insofar as that particular newspaper is concerned, and what conclusions can you draw from those findings? Then what conclusions? If you say then more than 50% of the stories are about gender-based violence, then what do you conclude? So do you conclude that there's a prevalence of gender-based violence in that specific community? If you are using a community newspaper, if you're using a national newspaper, then does that reflect the prevalence or the frequency of this type of crimes involving gender-based violence in the country, right? Depending on what newspaper are you using. All right, this is the final step of your research, of your the final step of your content analysis. Remember, there are also other questions in your portfolio where you need to also go back to your research problems and questions that you formulated in assignment 1, and then answer those research questions and problems based on your results or your conclusions, right? So this is what you need to do. So before I conclude, regarding the assignment 1 results, you should receive your results in the coming days. We are busy finalizing those results. We are aiming to have all the results out by the 24th of April to allow you enough time to prepare for your portfolio. That feedback that you'll be receiving, that you'll receive from your assignment 1, will then assist you to prepare for your portfolio. So be on the lookout for the results of assignment 1. So assignment 2, which is a quiz, will close on the 14th of April, right? And then the results will only be available after the closing date. So you'll get your results after the closing date. So I've had queries where students are asking why are they not getting the results after they've attempted the quiz, so that they can be able to improve their work, right? No, the quiz is designed in a manner that it allows for multiple attempts. However, the result, you will not get the results immediately after you've completed an attempt, or after you've attempted the quiz. You'll only get the results after the quiz closes, because to avoid students giving away answers and so forth and so forth. However, based on if you have done the quiz multiple times, the highest mark from those attempts will be taken as the final mark. Okay, thank you so much for listening to this recording. We will see you again next week for our another weekly session.